During this last section, we're going to look at the people-centric cultural dimensions. Here, we're focusing on the remaining four dimensions, which is high versus low persuasion, direct versus indirect communication, high versus low context communication, and assertiveness versus meekness. Now, if you notice the similarities between all of these dimensions, they all are referring to a method or how we communicate. Communication is very, very key when dealing with people from different cultures, because especially when we're dealing with the topic of direct versus indirect communication, in certain cultures, people don't always say what they mean. Sometimes you have to read between the lines and really try to decipher what is the actual meaning of the sentence or the phrase. For example, there's some cultures that are so polite, it is actually considered rude to tell somebody that they're not interested or no, they don't want something. So they might go a roundabout way and say, okay, it's not quite right now. Let's put this off and discuss this again in 6 months or so. Or I'm busy at the moment. Let's talk later. Let's talk in a few months down the line. As sales professionals, we have this all the time where we speak to somebody, we catch them off guard, and they're like, give me a call back on Friday. Give me a call back later on during the week. And then they deliberately don't answer your call. These are things that we can't lose heart over. It's just about communication, how different people communicate and how different cultures communicate. But the trick is to understand and to learn and to pick up these signs and pick up these signals early on, to avoid wasting your time and to avoid causing any or miscommunication or causing any grievances. Similarly, when we look at high versus low context communication, I'm somebody who's very high context. I use my hands, I use my body language, I use quite I use a lot of gestures when I'm speaking. This is a clear signal that I'm interested, I'm engaged in a conversation. When I'm sitting back and arms folded, it's clear signs that I'm disinterested, that I'm not paying attention. Similarly, when you're engaging with prospects from other cultures, you have to learn to pick up the signs. There is a saying that 80% of the communication is done through our body language. Regardless of the fact that we're working in a post-COVID environment and we're working from home and working remotely, these facts still remain true to this day. The issue is that when you're dealing in a virtual environment, I've noticed that especially when I'm dealing with a lot of cultures from the eastern side of the world, they tend to not like have their cameras on. I actually try to encourage people. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, yeah, at least put your camera on. Let me realize that you're a real person or something. To at least try and break the ice and to try and it's kind of act as an icebreaker to the conversation. But generally speaking, I appreciate that the situation that we're living in nowadays is changed and it's not as easy to pick up these signals and signs. But ultimately, it is a very fundamental part of the salesperson's job or the sales professional's job to really to understand and clearly understand what is being trying to communicate it, and so that you understand the prospect and understand the person that you're engaging with, and you can pick up the signs and navigate your way through the hurdles or the labyrinth of this intercultural communication. The last two dimensions, high versus low persuasion and assertiveness versus meekness, are very fundamental, especially within the negotiation. If we start with assertiveness versus meekness, you'll find that going back to this term of when we used to, when we used to, in face-to-face meetings, we all learned from a very early age. I mean, the concept of mirroring, and that's it. That mirroring makes people comfortable because they feel that that you guys are in sync. When you're communicating, you must be very cautious or sensitive to when you're dealing with people who are meek or assertive. Generally speaking, try to picture it like two magnets. If you have two confrontational people or two very assertive people trying to have a conversation, it can very often appear to the outside world that it is an argument or an aggressive, or come across as act of aggression. As a sales professional and engaging with people from different cultures, I try to create a balance. So if I know if I'm dealing with a very assertive or kind of a confrontational culture, I would deliberately kind of take a step back or be a bit more reserved in my conversation in order to keep the conversation flowing. There was a brilliant example the other day. I was in a somewhat frustrating mood. I was trying to do some work and I was just getting cold calls all day. And it was probably just after lunch, probably about 3 o'clock or so. I had this cold call, and it was probably about a fifth or sixth cold call I've had that day. And I was really frustrated and I didn't really want to. So I came on the phone, right, okay, who's this? Brrr. And I was quite aggressive in my tone and very assertive and really trying to shut this guy down very, very quickly. But the way his tone and the way he was so responsive and empathic on the phone, yes, I understand, sir. But can I ask maybe this, and this? By the end of the call, 20 minutes into it, we were laughing, we were joking, and he closed me down to a meeting. So, yes, I think one thing we should learn from these examples is that don't try not to react to the person or react to the scenario, but keep your head and try to approach the situation with confidence, but also be sensitivity to to the cultural aspects and all the other factors that influence in that interaction. Finally, we do the last dimension, which is high versus low persuasion. Negotiation is an art. It's not about just what you say, it's about how you say it. One of the things that when I'm as a sales trainer is I try to get the guys to really to focus on their pitch and their alternation. When I hate speaking to people who are just so monotone and just It just puts you to sleep. And while you're trying to focus, the other person is really trying to struggle and focus on what was being said. They're losing the context of the message. So sometimes it's best to, have some alternation, have some pitch in your voice, slow down and speed up at the appropriate times. If the message or what the sentence or the phrase that you've got to say is important, slow down. Give the prospect time to understand and digest what you're actually trying to say. Remember the power of the pause. It's a very, very strong tactic and almost a fundamental part of the negotiation process. Remember, high versus low persuasion is not about pushiness or being confrontive. It's about understanding that there's some cultures who just love to negotiate. There's some cultures who are very good at it. And there's some that just are not, and they just shy away from it. Your job is to understand the type of culture that you're engaging with prior to going to that negotiation, in order to tailor your communication and your message more effectively. By following these simple steps, you'll be able to overcome a lot more objections, a lot more hurdles, and ultimately convert a lot more deals. Thank you for your time. It's been great. Looking forward to giving you some more messages and some more insights when we come to do our final dossier for the European market, which I believe is the Finnish for Finland. And then we'll be moving on to a different region. Thank you. Speak soon. Bye-bye.